guys. They do magic. They are the magic guys.
So Will Smith slapped the shit out of Chris Rock. Bro, what do you think?
Bro, you know what was so funny about that is the moment it happened.
Right after our podcast, the joke.
Yeah. Joel hit me up and he's like, bro, my clip has never been so relevant now. of him getting punched for making a joke to a woman as well. So, you know, we're all about relevancy, but we just did it before Will Smith did it. So,
what do you think, bro? Do you think Will Smith is in the right or the wrong? Who's the winner of that situation there?
Oh, God. I mean, look, that kind of stuff, I feel like he settled off worldwide screen. So he probably could have done it somewhere else. You know what I mean? But I also feel like, you know, Chris Rock obviously wanted to keep his job and just keep his cool. But I feel like he should have been like, yeah, I'm gonna keep going once this guy's removed from the audience. Like, that's how I feel. But
bro, I would have absolutely like just ripped into it. I would have just made so many more worse jokes. I feel like he
actually that's true. Yeah,
I feel like he was going to, because there's a part where he's just like, I could, okay.
Yeah, yeah, I heard that. Yeah,
he's like, I could destroy you.
Yeah, man. Yeah. I think you're absolutely right. But at the end of the day, you know, he kept his job and kept his cool. Somehow kept going. But if he'd done it to Jason Ma,
this summer we've got a very special guest.
Yeah, you might have seen him on the magazine of Vanishing Ink last year for Magician of the Year. You may have seen him lecturing in one of your cities. This guy has traveled the world. You may have been learning from him on his Patreon. But today we have him to pick his brain and for you guys to ask your questions live. So ladies and gentlemen, welcome, Shane Cobalt. Here he is, ladies and gentlemen.
Hello. Howdy. I can't use that, right? That's Matt. Hi.
Well, they're going crazy out there.
Yeah, all of them.
That's it. All 100 of them. Shane, how you doing, man?
That's the podcast,
I
guys.
am good. You know, I'm good. I'm, testing negative, staying positive.
This is good. Hey, and we've got our friends in the comments at the same time, so we'll have some start asking some questions, guys, as we're chatting. But you are.
What's up, dude?
Yeah. So tell us, you're in Canada right now, right?
I'm in
Out of
Toronto.
all the countries.
I'm a little bit north of Toronto, but yeah, I'm in Canada right now.
Okay. And is that unusual for you to be in one place for so long?
I have not been in one place like this in so many years. When it first hit, when the pandemic hit hard, it was like March 14th, I think it was, around there. And I was in London, England at the time, and I was working with a producer, and we were touring a venue. I was trying to put a private, like not a private show, but sort of like a small, intimate show in one of the private members clubs in Soho. It was like, it sounds as pretentious as it was. Like, it really was over the top. I'm not unaware, and it was wild because we went from like, okay, I'm going to tour this venue. I went and had a bowl of ramen. And then the next day I was flying out, and I was like, it'll just be a few weeks. We've had like H1N1 and the different, viruses in the past. It'll be fine. Remember SARS-stock? There was like that one concert in Toronto years ago with the Rolling Stones, and Justin Timberlake played, and people threw bottles at him because they didn't want to see him. AC/DC came out and like rocked the house, and everyone just couldn't believe it. I thought it was going to be that. We'd have like maybe a month, maybe two tops, and then we'd be able to kind of come back to normal. But then I jumped on a plane, flew home, and I haven't really been airborne since. So this is beyond. This is
wild,
beyond
hey?
Real. Yeah.
Now you're lucky because in the virtual world you get to hang out in Australia with us.
I know.
Yeah.
You know what?
Lucky,
That's one thing I will say has been incredible about the pandemic, is that the number of people from around the world that just all of a sudden became local was incredible. Friends I hadn't seen for years, or people I hadn't talked to in a long time, would like throw a message out, or we jumped in a Zoom call, and some of these calls, man, would get wild. Like, I remember one of the Zoom calls would be like, you pop into the Zoom and someone's like, hey, you want to come hang out? Like, yeah, sure. You pop in, and then it would be like Ray Cosby, Bill Goodwin, and like just a list of names that you're like, this is the best magic convention I've never attended.
It's amazing.
Have you ever jumped in a video call with Josh before?
Well, we got to meet in person before all this crazy stuff.
We were live, like real live.
Yeah. Yeah.
We
Shane
made
was
out
so
a couple
committed.
times. It was great. I mean,
That good times. Yeah. I was like, you look like Jason. This will work.
yeah.
And so look, let's premise so that people realize how crazy it is for you to be in one place. I think it's important to explain what you were up to back then. Because the start of it that you explained to me was you were performing at the Magic Castle and someone particular was there. Do you want to lead us into the story?
Which person are we talking about? I've had a few sort of fun situations.
Oh my God. Okay. The castle is the place to go. So an agent saw you there.
Oh yeah, that's true. You're asking kind of my business model. How do I work? So actually, it went a couple of ways.
You can lie. It's fine.
Just lie. No, we can talk about it. That's my one rule with magic, because I won't lie to you. Even in performance, I will not lie to my audience. And that might be like, oh, you're a magician. Of course you lie. No, I don't. I may imply things. I may omit a slight truth. So, for example, if I put a card into the deck and it appears that it was your card, I won't say I'm going to put your card back in the middle.
Lie.
Will not lie. So yeah, no. But the whole point of this is to kind of like go into detail, I presume. So I was working the castle, and I was working the parlor, and after the show, I went out to the front, like the main bar area, and there was this guy there. It was a tall gentleman, really, really nice guy, but he was just sort of standing beside me, and he was wearing like really ill-fitting pants, like trousers, which was really funny because like everything else was really put together, like all the swag and stuff, but like he just wasn't dressed well. I couldn't quite match it up. And this other random guy comes up to me a little bit drunk, and he goes, "Hey," I'd finished my shows at this point. So I was working the parlor. I think it was late parlor. It was late parlor because Arthur Benjamin was working before me, the Math Magician. He's amazing to watch. So I finished the shows. I'm hanging out there, and this guy comes up to me and he goes, "Hey, can you make my girlfriend believe in magic?" And like, I had a couple drinks, so I was feeling a little bit more cocky than I usually am anyways. And I was like, yeah, why not? Bring her over. And I figured it was a no loss proposition, right? I'm like, if it doesn't work out, I'll be fine. And if it does work out, I win. So there's no way to lose here. Hey, Jerry. So here's what I did. So I pulled out some cards and I did some magic for her. And then afterwards, and it was pretty visual stuff. Like I find today we've lost a lot of magic isn't really beautiful in the same way that I think it used to be. Like beauty's not the goal for most people, and I don't think that that's really been the goal for a long time.
Interesting. I want to dive into that later too.
Yeah, definitely. We can put a pin in it. But I always felt like people are not aiming for beauty in the same way. We're often like aiming for reactions, and the reactions usually come from either pulling a big laugh or really shocking someone with like a kicker, so that they audibly react to something they didn't expect to happen. And I mean, that's just never really been my approach. I don't want it to be unexpected. I want it to be expected, but so impossible. You're like, no, I know what he's going to do, but you cannot do that. So that was kind of the approach. So I was showing her like beautiful color changes and things and sort of making cards melt. And I wanted that kind of like, people get hung on it when they see it. So I did a bunch of magic for her. And then I go, so can I ask you one question? And she goes, yeah. And she's a little bit drunk too, right? So she's really into that kind of moment. And it's very personal. Because someone's like right in your face at that time. I go, do you believe in magic? And she stopped for a second. She paused, and she went to open her mouth. And I said, you don't have to say a word. The fact that you had to stop and think about it tells me everything I need to know. Now, of course, I was giving her a gentleman's out, right? I was giving her the out without having to admit one way or the other that she said one thing and now she's been converted to something. It didn't matter anymore. The fact that she paused lent itself so well to the moment that she got really emotional, and she was like, can I have a hug? Which is another sort of funny thing that seems to happen. I'm like, yeah, of course you can. Of course you can. So I gave her a big hug, and then her husband, her partner, was like, thank you so much. And then he gave me a big hug, and he stuffed a bunch of money in my pocket, which is a very weird thing to happen. One, it's weird for someone to stuff anything in your pocket. And two, I was just sort of shocked. Well, the guy standing next to me was like a really big Hollywood producer. And I did not know that. The relatively ill-dressed guy. I'm not going to drop a name here, but he's doing some fun stuff. You've seen the movies he's been producing, I guess is the short and sweet of it. So after that, he goes, hey, I'm a producer in Hollywood. And I'm thinking like, you're not coaching me. Like, I don't know how the rules work. What's going on here? It was so bizarre. And he goes, no, here, let me give you my business card. He pulls out his wallet. He has no business cards. He's like, I promise you, I'm not lying to you. I'll have my assistant call you. And I'm like, all right. So we exchanged numbers, and then flash forward to like, midweek, and I get a call from the assistant, and they're like, please hold for, for this person. I'm like, that's a very professional way to get in touch. And sure enough, we went out for sushi. He took me to a Sugarfish, and we just had a great time. We chatted, brought me into the office, and then one of the other producers that he was working with, I said like, hey, why don't let's do a castle night. We'll go out to the Magic Castle. Please come be my guests. And one of the people that came out, it was his partner, who is this crazy super agent, like booking agent. So then from there, she's like, can we work together? I'm like, absolutely. And I found out that what she does, and I guess this is sort of what I more or less do nowadays, is I work for private concierge services to create very specific experiences. So often unusually wealthy clients will fly me around, and I get to do very, very, very small events for small groups for too much money. And that's kind of how I get to travel around so much.
Sounds like that sounds like the dream, right? Like
it is and it isn't. Like it's really good on paper, but the clients are extremely demanding at times, which is okay. Most of the time, people are super, super sweet, and super kind, and it's not an issue. Sometimes they're weird, but like they're funny weird. Like I've got one guy that brings me on his first dates. He just wants to have a neat friend, right?
Wow.
Like so he hires a wingman. He's in San Francisco, and there's another client out in London, England, who owns an entire block. So like his postal code is 3 letters. Because he owns the whole thing. And I was teaching magic to him. That was a really funny one. And he was like, I remember seeing photos of his house. And for his daughter's birthday, he got her a second pony. And it was marched through the kitchen because his kitchen is large enough for a pony to march through. I'm like, this is wild. But he wanted to learn. You know what he wanted to learn? He wanted to learn how to make a cigarette vanish. That's all he wanted to do. He just wanted to vanish a cigarette. And he wanted to impress his buddies at the pub. And I'm like,
wow.
Of course I'll teach you.
And you know what? Don't YouTube it. Just get your concierge to hire one of the top magicians in the US to come and teach you himself.
you know what I did instead? We went further. We did it all digitally. We did it through Zoom, and we made sure that he had a record, so he had a video of all the little touches and things that I had for it. And then I went ahead and I had every single thumb tip that we know exists sent to him. So I said, look, you're going to have every single tool available. Pick whichever one you want, put the rest in a box and tuck it away in a drawer somewhere, just so your kids don't stumble upon them and freak out. And if they ever wear out, try them out and change them. If you ever want some advice with it or we need to kind of switch them out, let me know and we'll work on it.
Yeah.
And that's what we did. So it became, I think people forget that a lot of the time, the clients that I'm working with are buying convenience.
That's right. They're buying their time, right? Like they're saving their time.
It's exactly right. They're buying convenience and they're buying quality control. So I've already been qualified based on, my agent. My agent, they know that they're going to get a high quality person in the process. And if anything ever goes wrong, there's only been, I think, one event that was really off. And it was because they kind of booked me against my rider, which my rider really simply is, I don't do magic for children. Like kids don't want to see me. I'm not that fun. I'm interesting, I'm fascinating sometimes. I'm not terribly funny, but I'm situationally funny. So like you don't want me for a teenager's birthday party.
Was this the lady that you told me was like, oh, you're a magician? Oh, yeah, show my kids something then. Was that story?
No, that's one of my favorite stories in magic. That story, I tell that story often if I'm lecturing because people ask me fun questions like, how do you make people cry? That was an interesting one. That was in Australia. I think some of my record moments of lecturing were definitely across Oz.
Wow.
Like longest lecture ever was like 8 hours and 10 minutes, which was wild.
I remember I was so upset. I had to leave in Brisbane. I don't think Brisbane's lecture was the longest one, but I had to leave, and then I heard it still carried on for like 3 more hours.
Yeah.
But we have
go as long as you guys want to go. That's usually the default setting.
Exactly. Benny has a question. This could be a lot. This is a deep question. What do you think the future of magic will be? Thanks, Benny.
That's a great question. I think the answer is not, I don't think I'm going to have some remarkable prediction that's going to become true. I find that what I want the future of magic to be and what the future of magic ends up being very rarely, if ever, line up. It just doesn't, this is not copacetic. And I think the reason, I'll give a couple of examples. So on my Facebook page, just like a couple of days ago, I just posted a simple question, all you have to do is ask. That was it. All you have to do is ask. And then Well, I did not expect everyone to ask so many questions, but then I just weird questions. Like some questions, just how are you? Great question. You know, some questions were rather obscure. How, things like that. And I was like, okay, this is fun. But when I posted that, I completely lost my train of thought. Where was I going with that? Future of magic.
Well, Jace, what do you think the future of magic is?
Yes.
Okay, good. That's what we thought.
But no, I remember it was. So in one of the questions, somebody actually asked sort of about like, what was my least favorite book in magic, or like, what things do I dislike? And, you know, I'll mention one of them because it'll be a good example of how I was way off with what I think the future of magic should be versus what the future of magic became. So, for example, I would say right now, currently, a lot of close-up magic through a screen relies, and I think as a general term, we rely way too much on black art. I think that as an idea in magic is overused and abused, and it's made people.
You know what, Gary? I couldn't agree with you more. Couldn't agree with you more. What can you say these days that doesn't offend someone?
Everyone's going to be upset no matter what. But I mean, I've also tried to like, one person described me as unapologetic. They were like, what was the one word that's unapologetic? And I would agree with that. I don't think magic needs more people telling you how great you are. I think that magic needs more people telling you that you're not good enough and that we need to do better. Because there's a lot of people selling snake oil and they're happy to tell you how good you are. And I think that that's just not the world we should be living in. So if we went back to like, I think it was around 2006-ish, Mnemonica came out, and one of the questions on that little Ask Me Anything, or you know, all you gotta do is ask, was someone said like, "What's your least favorite book on card magic?" or "What's a book you hate on card magic?" And I said, "Well, hate's a strong word. Hate's a strong word." Yeah. I said, "But you know, a book I'm not terribly fond of is." Hold
on, one sec before you carry on with that thought, Gary. Do you mind typing in what you mean by some bits might have to change, or give me an example? You do that while Mr. Cobalt here will explain his point. Go ahead.
Yeah, so my thought was just like, you know, with Mnemonica coming out, I never really understood, and I still don't truly understand the full appeal of a memorized deck. I understand its limitations, I understand what you can do with it, but I've never been attracted to the idea of excluding or removing visual sleight of hand in my work. And I found that as soon as it came out, it was almost like this weird magic drug where all my friends that were doing it stopped doing their sleights. Like their hands just kind of like tapered off, because of course they were so into it that it became its own little microcosm, its own world. And if it was outside of the realm of Mnemonica, they weren't really touching it. So a lot of their sleight of hand skills were slowly degenerating. And then everyone knew it to the point where you just yellowed a number and someone knew what the card was at that number. So I went the exact opposite way. So for the future of magic, I mean, I never would have been able to tell at that time that Mnemonica was just going to take over everything and become like the de facto number one go-to. Now, the big problem for me with Mnemonica, the reason I'm not a big fan of it is I find that Mnemonica is simply going to be a revelation of a sequence of cards that have been prearranged, which means that it's not impossible, it's improbable. If anything is in some sort of prearrangement, all you're really doing is showing them in such a way and explaining why the arrangement is extraordinary or incredible. Like any card at any number is not a miracle, it's a coincidence. In fact, it's like 1 in 52. One could even argue 2 in 52, depending from top or bottom of the deck. You can deal 25 and show 26. You can deal.
If it's shuffled, isn't it technically 1 in 16 quintillion?
No, there's 52 positions for any particular card. So at any given
time,
right.
But once a deck is shuffled, it has.
The odds do not change because of the mixing procedure. The card still could be. And again, from the face of the deck or the bottom of the deck. But that's not the point. The point is, for Mnemonica to be a miracle, you really have to explain it. And we
might have reached a disagreement point on this one, buddy. It's absolutely changed with the change.
Well, this is a good discussion, because I perform Mnemonica regularly, right? But
I don't. I actually hate mnemonicas as well. Yeah. But I disagree with you on your assertion of like the odds.
What can I ask? What about? So the thing that I love doing with it is, so I will always do my normal material first, and then at the end, this is like my. We think I'm doing sleight of hand. Let me show you non-sleight of hand. And then I'll go into mnemonicosis, right? Where they're essentially, I'm saying I'm going to move one card to a very specific spot, put it in their hands, and then they're able to cut to their own card that they've just named. So is that magic, or are you still saying that's a
here's coincidence? What I'd say. It's not that it's coincidence. Consider this. Is it impossible or improbable? Impossible means it shouldn't happen according to physics. Improbable means it's very unlikely to occur based on the number of possibilities. That's the kind of the definitions I'm playing with. I would say what you presented is highly improbable, but I would not classify that as truly impossible.
So then, therefore, is anything happening with cards just improbable, not impossible?
No, it depends on what you're having. Like if it's a physical manifestation, if a playing card were to vanish, like a rub-a-dub-dub vanish, I think most people would say that that is impossible. A card under the hand appears as though it disappears, and therefore that physical of visual should not exist. It's beyond the numerical probability of it. So if I took a playing card at my fingertips and tossed and the card just disappeared, that you would probably argue, I would argue at least, that should be impossible. It's the appearance of impossibility. But if my card happens to be at a number that I name, it's highly improbable, but it could just happen. It could just happen. It is possible. It's just highly improbable.
I know what trick not to show you on your birthday, all right?
No, and that being said, let's make sure we're on the same page too. It's not that mnemonic is not a great tool. I think it's a fantastic tool. I think that the way that it's used is often as either a revelation of a sequence of cards in a prearranged order, or it's used often as an open index. Since I know where every card is, I can locate any card at any time. So I think it has factored out a lot of sleight of hand, but I got to be honest, man, people want to see you dance.
Yeah,
I
agree with that.
No one comes to the show to see you do nothing. It feels weird. It's like that whole idea of here's one card on the table, name a card, turn it over, it matches. Well, we're gonna go, that's a miracle. No, it isn't. It's not even close to a miracle because they don't know if it. Because what's the first thing you think of if you're a layman? Yeah, but you just got lucky. If that can explain away an effect,
name a card.
7 of clubs.
Holy sh! No.
Imagine.
But it wasn't impossible. It could have happened.
Exactly.
It could have happened.
No, I agree. I agree with the whole like people want to see you dance. Yeah. You know, I get clients specifically. I get hired for a lot of law firms, and they hire me because I do a lot of like sleight of hand intensive stuff. They just want to see like crazy stuff. I really appreciate the skill behind it, I guess.
I'd make one more observation that I think is really paramount here. With improbabilities, you have to talk more. And you have to explain what you're doing. Otherwise, people don't know why this matters. With impossibilities, the presentation, you can limit the number of words, and the presentation can be completely unrelated to what you're doing in the same way. It doesn't have to explain the action. You can tell some remarkable story. You can talk about a time in your life, or this one moment changed my life. Do you want to see that moment? They go, yeah. You wave your hand and the card melts into another card, and they go, that was beautiful. But for anything that's mnemonic related, not always, but generally speaking, I have to explain why I'm about to deal a bunch of cards or show you more than one card, other than think of a card and you have it, you reach in your pocket, you pull it out, and it's a card to impossible position. But again, I mean, I always consider this outside of an open index. Outside of an open index, I don't find that mnemonica fits my idea of what I would like magic to be. I'm not saying it's not right for other people. I'm just saying it's not mine. It's not my cup of tea. There's no doubt about its success, but the other thing is, I'd say that after you see a bunch of mnemonic
down that line of thought, predictions are not magic. Then
we didn't say they're not magic. We said they're not impossible. They're improbable.
Yes, that's true.
Fair. That's fair. So I think circling back to the future of magic. So you were saying back then that looked like what the future of magic was going to be.
No,
right?
so back then I was just saying I would never have predicted that would be the future of magic. So I'm really bad at predicting what the future is.
With this line of thought of improbability, though, doesn't that become increasingly more impossible each time you do it? So, for example, it's like name a card, 7 of hearts, boom,
yes,
7 of hearts.
Now
think of a name,
repetition.
Think of a name in your mind, and then you think of it, and it's like, oh, you're thinking of Sarah, And now the statistical odds diminish so much so that it would become impossible.
I'm glad you said that. If you spoke to a statistician, they would say, no, that's not true. The odds do not change because of repetition. So I'll give you an example. We flip a coin 100 times, and every time it hits heads. What's the chances the next time it's going to be tails?
No, of course. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying the next time that the odds will change. I'm saying that if you put everything cumulatively together, then the odds become impossible. Because it's like, what is the actual odds in a single sitting that you could tell someone what they're thinking of in terms of a name? You could predict the card that they were going to pick. You could tell them the number that you rolled on a dice. You could predict which hand they're holding the coin in or whatever. And you did this in the sequential order in one sitting, and you were right every single time. And the odds of all of those things aligning in such a way that you got them all right becomes so astronomically low that it becomes impossible, right?
it never becomes impossible because none of those things are impossible. None of them are. And
then at the end, a guy
you described is more mentalism than it is magic. And I'm a magician, not a mentalist. I'm not going to tell you things you already know. I'm not interested in that so much. The other thing is, I don't like working in the mental world of things, like with a lot of the thoughts and knowing what you're thinking or knowing your pin and stuff, because
Bro, that's the scientist from Jurassic Park, Patrick.
Life will find a way.
Like, I'm not interested in trying to convince people of things they already believe. I think people generally believe to some extent that maybe psychic stuff could exist. Maybe mental powers could exist. I'm not interested. And that's just a personal thing. That's not a knock on anybody else for doing the work. Everyone needs to have their own style. I wear suits. I know a lot of people don't. That's cool too. Like, there's no judgment. It's just for me, my personal rules, just the rules for my personal magic fall under particular categories. And Jason, all the stuff you suggested could be incredible in the moment. You could present this hand or that hand. I don't know if they're going to walk away and go, that guy's a magician, unless you told them you were a magician. They may walk away and go, that guy could read my mind, or that guy could tell where everything was. And I don't want that to be the story afterwards. And that's important to me. When the audience leaves, it's not about telling stories. It's about telling stories worth retelling. I'll tell you a story, do a magic trick, and then the audience hopefully goes, I saw this incredible magician. And then I studied psychology in university. Stories will stay with people longer. So if I can tell a story with it that's not related to the actual exposition or the procedure of the effect, afterwards I find my audiences will go, I saw this amazing magician. And they'll go, well, what did he do? And they'll be able to start telling the story.
He put an X on my hand without me knowing. It was amazing.
Well, I got to be honest, I hate that trick. I hate that trick.
The double cross thing.
Yeah.
I don't like tricks. I mean, my tricks, I try to make my magic Google proof. So I think that if someone searches X on hand, they're going to see 20 magicians that do it. So immediately, like, you can't last the car ride home. Once they jump in the car and start driving.
Shall we quickly test that theory?
Yeah, let's give it a go.
X on
So Jason
hand.
is Googling X on hand.
Magic trick.
All right, so it looks like...
So you got to add magic trick.
Let's add magic trick. Yeah, magic trick. Okay.
Boom. There you go.
There it is.
Boom. We've got everything from like double cross on AliExpress. So
literally here, yeah, Theory 11, double cross, penguin magic, double cross, everything, yeah.
There you go.
Think about that. As soon as they finish seeing you, they jump in the car ride home, and there's 4 people in the car. I wrote an essay on this on the Patreon. You know, the person in the front seat loves magic. They don't care what you do; it's all great. The person beside them, maybe it's their partner. They're like, I'm not the biggest fan in the world. If one thing gets visible or seen, it's not whatever. I'll go because you like it, but I'm not interested. And then the back seat, we've got the other 2 people. If each person is Googling, they're going to find out. And in that conversation, that's like one sentence, and your method's obliterated.
So what kind of magic do you enjoy performing? Do you perform casually? Like, are you
very much so?
Mm-hmm. So what kind of things do you like to perform yourself? Like, I know you study a lot of classical magic. I think you said to me nothing past Ed Marlowe's age era at one point.
Everyone's so funny about that quote. I find people come back to me and they tell me different things. I actually usually say I don't know anything after Vernon died.
Right.
And then everyone's like, he doesn't know anything after he was born, or, you know, everyone just like gently changes it around. But basically anything after 1992, if it wasn't being done before 1992, and that's just a generalization. I mean, like,
yeah, of course.
The Vandy Bossy book, the Arietology.
How will you go with answering this question? How can we trust our audiences as even seeing something magical when we ourselves are blinded by magician's mind? Because I like to call it magician's rot.
That foul stench that comes with it. It's a good question. I would say this. I think that we have a horribly misguided understanding of what a natural reaction to magic is. We often coerce our audiences into giving us the reaction we think is correct. And I think that there's a lot of ways to react to magic. Often we kind of are in a position where we want people to laugh. So we tell a lot of jokes, or we step on the magic and throw a punchline out to get that laugh, or we want people to be like shocked and surprised. So I find as magicians, we usually thrive off of people reacting in a way that we want. And that reaction is usually a very visual one or a very audible one. Whether we're coercing it with like clapping, or whether we're like, oh, we'll do one more if we get a standing ovation, like we're usually pulling for something. But I found that the most powerful stuff that I've done, and don't get me wrong, not everything I do is going to knock it out of the park, but the most powerful ones that I have, people often, if it's really close up, they want a hug. And that's a reaction I kind of know I've done something well, I think. They want to actually hang out and talk, which is always nice. Or if it's in more of a formalist show, if there's a group in front of me, I mean, they're left silent. I truly believe that the natural reaction to really, really wonderful, great magic is silence. It's not. I don't think they have the capacity to clap when they're really dumbfounded by something. I think you guys have both had that reaction too, when people are just like,
No, never in my life.
It's like if you saw an
I'm not a very good
alien.
magician, so I just.
you look like Jesus. You don't have to do as much as you might think.
I think 1 million people following you online, Jace, might say otherwise. But if you saw an alien, you're probably, you know what? Yeah, it's kind of like you would be in awe, right? You would have nothing to say. You're seeing something you've never seen. You wouldn't be like, yeah, an alien guy, yeah.
I don't know, man. I'd be like, what the fuck is that? And I'd maybe throw something at it to see if it's real.
No, I'd be like, let me get this in the vlog. Give me a sec. Look, guys, it's goddamn alien.
Yo, what's up, guys? Josh Norbito here, and I just found an alien over here. So smash that like button if you haven't already.
I'd be like,
let's go get probed, boys.
We're gonna break dance with them. Let's go.
Oh, wrong one, but that still works. That's for probing. Okay, good. No, this is great. So, so what magic do you like doing when you're out just casually? Are you bringing
a deck of cards is usually in my pocket. It's like I got my wallet, my cell phone, and a deck of cards, and I'm ready to go. I don't usually bring a lot of props and stuff with me. I try not to look like a magician that's all bulked out, ready to do a show. And I usually try to push off the idea. Like I don't try to force my magic upon people. I don't like to do that. I think that I feel like I'm aiming for a different response to my magic. Like I want to fascinate my audience. I want them to the stuff that I'm saying to them is so interesting that they want to know more. And that actually came from, remember the Howard Stern movie, Private Parts?
Oh,
a long time ago.
That sounds enticing.
Right? It's a Howard Stern movie. There was a part in the movie where Paul Giamatti is there and he's talking to, like, Stern just moved to New York and he's probably, I think, like WNBC or whatever the studio was that he was doing his radio show for. And he wanted to fire him so much. I think he called him pig vomit on the air. That was his one manager that hated him. And he was like, so tell me, like, we did a survey. Tell me about it. And Giamatti goes and asks, and the guy tells back in to Paul Giamatti. He says, well, the average Howard Stern hater, he listens. The average Howard Stern listener that likes Howard Stern listens for an hour and 25 minutes. And he's like, an hour and 25 minutes? What was the response? What was the most common response? Like, why do they listen? I said, they want to hear what he's going to say next. And he goes, okay. What about everybody else? He goes, the average Howard Stern hater listens for 3 hours and 30 minutes. And Giamatti loses it. And he goes, if they hate him, why are they listening?
They're all fanboys, baby.
The average response, they want to know what he's going to say next. So it's just the idea that there's so much beauty and mystery. And I think people love to hear stories. We've been trained to hear stories since we were children. When we start hearing stories, we usually stop talking and listen because we want to know what happens next, what happened or what's going to happen. So I often lead in with stories and things that are like, hey, there's this incredible magician in Las Vegas named Michael Skinner. He's no longer with us, but back in the 1980s, he was actually the resident magician at the Golden Nugget. And he was Steve Wynn's favorite magician. In fact, every night Steve Wynn would walk into the hotel, he'd have his clipboard, he'd shake hands with everybody on the way in, and he'd always ask for a brand new deck of cards. He'd sit down with Michael and go, Michael, show me my trick. Do you guys want to see that trick?
Yeah, that's going to be the first question they'd ask, yeah.
What was the trick, right? So usually my presentation, and that's a very generic presentation if you think about it. But I remember, like, I had this old VHS tape of Michael Skinner when I was a kid. This, like, a random magician, like Pennsylvania or Mississippi, somewhere in like the mid-US sent to me. And he was like, it was just like this like 5 hours of Michael Skinner, grainy VHS. I was like 14, 15 at the time. And in it, Skinner talks about like intros and outros to magic. Like there's just a very simple, you can say certain things and do anything you want afterwards. So like one of the classic ones on there, he goes, there's certain types of magic that magicians actually only perform for each other. Do you want to see that kind of, do you want to see one of those tricks? And I try to build in a little bit like that little moment of consent. The story has to be endearing or interesting enough that they say yes. And of course, it primes them well for the next thing. Could you hold your hand out for me? Yes. Every question I ask, I want the answer to be yes.
Yeah. Imagine they say no. You go, oh, well, here's a card trick anyway.
No, you know what? I go, me neither. Like I will agree with them and roll with it. I want to also be a gentleman in this situation. I don't want anyone to feel comfortable or bad about it. So, but yeah, for me, a lot of the performing stuff that I'm doing, I'll pull a deck.
What do you mean? They say no, you go, well, you're gonna fucking see it anyway. You hear me? You hear me? And then you're like, put the deck of cards in a sock and beat the shit out of them with it.
That's
until they
right.
Submit, and then you show them. Then you get them to pick a card.
Keep my magic out your mouth. And then
That's it.
And then there's a slap.
That's it.
And off we go. But I mean, I think it's also important to recognize, like, I can't perform for magicians the way I perform for laymen, because they're not willing to go on the journey. They don't want to go down that rabbit hole with me, and that's okay. But they ask to do it, and I'm like, you don't want to do it. I know you want to experience it, but you're not in a position to be able to, because you're looking for different things. So it's kind of hard to explain what I do to people, and for magicians at least, and then to show them, unless there's laymen there and they can see it. I mean, I think the best one was actually in Australia for Anthony Damasi's School of Magic. That was the 8 hours and 10 minute lecture, and it was supposed to end at midnight. And it was Anthony's partner at the time was there, and it was like, he just said, hey, midnight sort of the time limit. I said, no problem, I'll check in at midnight. And then we hit midnight, and I said, well, guys, we've hit that time. And then I turned to his partner. I said, did you want to see more? And she went, yeah. Now remember, his partner has just sat through 8 hours, or I guess it was about 5 hours at the time, 5 hours of like basically a more or less card magic lecture. For her to ask for more is a wild moment.
And she's the partner of a magician
who runs a magic school. Yeah, Anthony's amazing.
Yeah.
And we went for 3 more hours. And partway through it, she had this moment when, like, you can see it. I was doing a bunch of like color changes from the Ross Bertram books. I'm a big fan of Ross Bertram. And she kind of she sort of popped. It was a great moment when she was like, it's real magic. It's real magic. And those are the moments that it's really hard to let you experience as magicians, but when you see someone else experience it, you get it.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like it looks the way that she wanted it to look. That's all she's really saying.
Yeah, and that's the oxygen for us. We're like,
right? Validate me. Validate me.
Yeah, well, not even that. It's like, that's why I practice so hard, like.
I think we underestimate how much laymen love to see the stuff that we love to see. We assume they're in like a different category of spectator, and I think it's the exact opposite. Like, they love magic as much as we do. We just don't tell them about it the right way, because we treat them like laymen and we don't think of them as magicians. But if you just slightly change the perspective on like how you show people stuff or choose material for audiences, you get this incredible response. People are so affectionate and positive, and they feel like you've let them in. It's not an exclusive club anymore. It's like, hey, dude, you don't have to be on that side of the stage. Why don't you come sit beside me? We can talk about this. You can ask questions. I'm not going to, when I'm performing for laymen, my magic persona is very abrasive, and I know that. It's all like we talked about earlier. It's kind of on purpose. We don't need one more person telling us how great we are. I've never gotten better at magic because someone told me how good something was. I've gotten better when my heroes and my idols in magic sort of just crushed me, and I thank them for it. It just makes us closer, and I trust them for it. That looked good. Mm-hmm. But
no, don't say that. It was crap. Practice 10 more hours, Jason.
Why?
That's what'll make him better. That's what you're saying, right?
Yeah, but look how much fun he was having. It was visual. It was playful. I think it was the recipe for a good time.
Absolutely.
What can I say? Fuck the rest.
Ross Did you know that great line in one of his books, man, where he's like, you can't only do miracles. People get tired.
Josh, my penis was in the Guinness World Book of Records.
Oh, good segue.
And then the librarian told me to take it out. So,
oh boy. Well, speaking of Jason's penis and books, what do you think about TikTok
This
magic?
better not be a coffee table book. If this is a coffee table book, I do not.
No.
Actually, that's not true. Send me a preview book. I do want to review it. I just want to see how it ends.
Yeah, look. TikTok magic.
It's a great question.
What do you think? And let me premise this. Our buddy Jason here, as you know, has great sleight of hand. I think he's one of the top watched magicians on TikTok.
Incredible.
So with that in mind, roast him. No, tell us your thoughts.
There's no roast. I think every platform and medium has a place and a time. And I think that, there's this incredible beast in magic that always needs to be fed. And I don't think that TikTok lends itself to produce the greatest magic, because at a certain point, it's so consumable with content that you have to go from your A material to your B material. You just can't knock out hit after hit after hit. So I think that unfortunately it does have.
Yeah, I'm taking a break from content posting at the moment because I don't want to post shitty magic.
Right? I think the burnout can be very high. I think that unfortunately, what TikTok has done for magic? It has proven to us that you cannot buy it, because when you remember that hard to watch.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
And,
do
like,
we?
it was everybody's Instagram thing. Everyone was doing it. And like, guess what? People on TikTok purposely went out of their way to be like, this is bullshit, and I'm insulted by this. They went on Vanishing Inc. or what I think it was Vanishing that was selling it, spent $40, whatever it was, bought it, went boom, and then just showed you how it worked. And that was the whole content. And I think it's important to recognize that TikTok has now opened the door for mockery of magic in that particular way. If people are going to mock what we do like that,
but it's going to get rid of the weak. It's cleansing the weak.
Precisely. It's reestablished. It changed the bar. It's like, okay, guys, we can't just go buy stuff, put it online because we're just trying to feed the beast. We can't feed them fast food. And I feel like magic was being fast food for quite a while now. We've definitely been pushed to the point where, like, if you're not good enough to do it, what are you doing? Now, that being said, TikTok's a remarkable platform for fame. I think it was entirely designed to make people famous. Like, you can flip through quickly, and it's very small snippets, but I don't think the medium lends itself to all styles of magic. So I don't think for me it's a great medium or a great platform for it, but I generally try to stay offline. I like magic to be an in-person live experience. But that doesn't mean the medium's not relevant or important. It just means that it takes a very special approach to, I think, maximize its impact. And good on you, Jason, if you manage to master it. I'm not very good at those sorts of things. Like, it's way out of my wheelhouse. I don't know how I would approach it. I don't know what I would do if I was put in the situation. And for a lot of the stuff that I do, I see it and I was like, man, I wish I could fit into this particular groove, but I just don't think it fits me.
Of course, Brendan Tooley. Yeah, I did learn that joke last night. The dick in the book. Yeah,
I saw your Insta story of you guys all hanging out.
Yeah, bro, that joke was from Voltac.
That joke is so funny.
Wow, a non-magician came up with the good joke.
Bro, Voltac's funny, man. Funny. Street performers, man, they're all funny.
What is this
Can
question?
you talk about your cookies, bro? Yeah.
I talk about your cookies. That's funny. Yeah, no, that's a very non-sexual question. It's coming right after the dick in the Guinness Book of Records. So here we are. I love debate. I really love debate. So a couple of days ago,
What are two things you like to eat? Oh, sorry.
They have a lot of the same. So yeah, I love baking stuff really elaborately, but yeah, my mom has a thyroid issue, and when it came about, the doctors were like, you can't really have a lot of sweets. So I asked her, I talked to her, and I was like, what's your favorite thing in the world? Like, what's your favorite sweet? And she said chocolate chip cookies. So I went, all right, I'm going to find the recipe for the best chocolate chip cookies in the world. And then I just was like, okay, well, how do I do this? So I just Googled like crazy and found everything that I could. And then what he's really talking about is I baked some cookies the other day, and they look really good. But yeah, I've just been collecting all these little tips and secrets and stuff. And then every once in a while, I make my mom there's a whole bunch of cookies and bring them to her, and she's the happiest woman on earth. So, but I go hardcore with it. Like, I went and got like Godiva dark chocolate. I bought like cases of it. Like, I wanted everything to be so decadent and so over the top that she didn't want to eat more than one. So it kind of served the purpose of the doctor being like, you can't have a lot of sweets. So I tried to overwhelm her with such decadence that it's just like, oh, I just can't have any more. It's too much. And it works. She breaks them in half. I can always tell she's always eating half a cookie. But
quality over quantity.
Yeah, but if you want to know more details about the cookies, I'd say look up Kenji. Kenji Lopez is like, he's a baller when it comes to stuff. There's a great book called The Food Lab. And in The Food Lab, he talks about like how to make cookies look a certain way and what makes them special. And I mean, for my cookies, at least, I'm putting them in for like almost an exact 10 minutes at like middle rack on a convection bake. And the big thing that he pointed out to make them look sort of like those not rugged, but yeah, get it. Those like the kind of like the jaggedy or scraggly cookies. He says, like, you make a ball of the dough and you break it in half and then you put it together again so the broken edges on the outside. And when it bakes, the cookie doesn't look like those Pillsbury ones that have been sliced so perfectly. It has a bit more of a rustic look, let's say.
Now we're getting to know the real Shane.
That's right. All the food stuff. And then, of course, always top them with finishing salt. There you go. You want a good food tip? Finishing salt. Go get mulled-in finishing salt. The flakes are like this big. They're humongous. And you just put a little sprinkle on top. And then each of the cookies, I just put a little bit of that on top of them. And you hit that like salt in the middle. And it's just like life is complete.
You heard it here first, folks. This is what you can expect to learn in Shane Cobalt's Patreon.
That's actually
monthly
true.
Cooking videos. It is true? Oh, well, there you go. Hey.
Not entirely. Before the world ended and the Patreon started, I was actually teaching some cooking things because people would ask me, like, what's your favorite thing to cook? And at the time, I was like, chicken wings. But here's how to do it. Like, you cook them twice. You got to cook them once, and then you cook them in butter if you want that butter, and then you throw sauce and you cook them in the sauce in like a wok, and you'll get like really perfect chicken wings. But obviously, the magic is overtaking the cooking.
True. Or you get a wife like Jason's who can cook everything, and you don't have to do a thing.
That's impressive. Well done, you.
I know, you got a wife. That is impressive.
Someone married that fat idiot.
And you do that. Jeez.
Roped her in, bro. As soon as she let her guard down.
Literally.
Married.
Like, I learned to tie that shit, and I...
Oh, God.
It was a shotgun wedding.
Yeah, for those listening, though, Shane's Patreon is in the description below.
Oh, is it?
And
oh, cool.
is this a... are you
We also get 20%
things...
of everyone that signs up, bro. Is that correct?
We should. I didn't realize we were doing it this way. I was just like a special tier, but like, all right, if you guys are part of
the come on, give us your Patreon.
Yeah.
But it's dobettermagic.com. Super easy. Dobettermagic.com.
Dobettermagic.com. See, that's it. That's the best one.
Damn. Is that for real?
Yeah. If you go to dobettermagic.com.
Because magicians suck, Josh, don't you know?
Automatically.
Okay.
No, it's not that they suck. It's just that you can always do better. You can always do better.
They're not good. Yeah.
Yeah. Some people can do more better than others. Yeah.
All right, so anyway, a little earlier on, someone brought up a thing about like some of the
Bob Hospital knows what's up.
Need to change. Here we some of the jokes need to change. I think it was Geary Mars. Yes. Oh, here we go. This is what she was referring to. I'm talking about choice of language, touching someone, and props. You know, I agree with touching someone. I don't think you should touch people in your performance. I really
depends on the touching.
I hate it, bro.
And the
I see
intent.
videos of like mentalists like touching people on the back, like all weird. Like it's so strange to me. I'm like, bro, just don't touch them.
Contact is an art form.
You can just as easily read their mind without touching the poor woman's back.
But if your hand isn't on the back of their skull, then then
they can get
how
away.
Are they going to hear it?
Exactly.
When I perform magic, I like to hold them in a Muay Thai clench that way they can't get away while I'm trying to read their minds.
I want to choke them out.
I deliver a quick knee to the ribs.
Thank you, Jerry.
Oh, you're in trouble now, Jace. Language, buddy.
Sorry about
Language.
Yeah, I think contact with audiences and stuff and the jokes. I mean, at the end of the day, I think it's important to recognize that some stuff we were doing in the past was never appropriate, but we were never shown a better way. So for me, I always try to err on the side of caution. I really don't try to touch my audience or come in contact. Like I made a controversial post. I didn't think it was controversial at the beginning of COVID, and people lost their minds. I said, well, now that we can't see each other, guys, we got to stop doing double lifts in spectators' hands for reactions. And people were like, you're elitist,
no more here and there.
Piece of shit. How could you do such? And they were so mad at me because they thought I was crapping on the double lift. But I'm like, no, what I was saying was we're not in person anymore. We're through digital. So you can't rely on the fact that it's in their hand to get that extra pump of a reaction. And no one took that away. No one read that out of the thing. And all I was really saying was that, like, guys, we can't exploit that physical contact now. You can't just do a double lift in someone's hand and snap your fingers and have them turn over and freak out because it's in their hand. Like, we lost that. So what are we going to do now? If that's not your thing, what do we do now?
See, Bob, I think there's a big difference between like touching someone and placing things in someone's hand, right? Like when I say touching someone, like if you've ever seen like mentalists, particularly like I would say like, I don't know, what's the best word for this? Mentalists that aren't like high caliber. Mentalists? They think that like they're creating an atmosphere by like.
Let's go like Russian roulette, for example. Like where they got their hand.
Oh my God.
Yeah, that's another thing as well. Yeah. It's different to like, if you're like, oh, could you hold your hand out for me? I'm just going to place this in your hand and you put like a card there or whatever. That's a totally different thing entirely. But yeah, I don't know. You see it all the time.
Though, like, why don't we just ask?
Yeah, that's it.
Can
I do that if I do need to touch anyone, because I do a coin routine where it's all in their hands, and I go, you don't mind if I just touch your wrist or put this in your hand or whatever. And that's because I just rather avoid the PR, the bad PR, baby.
You know what I do?
My jokes are wildly inappropriate, man.
No. Me too. When I'm joking with people, like there's a certain point when you get close enough with your audience that like if you do cross like a line, so to speak, you've transcended. Like this is terrible, but
that's interesting.
I would say this, like if I'm doing some sort of like a walk around gig, often I'm working with other magicians, often people ask me to sit down. And this is going to sound terrible, but like the help stands.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? If you get invited to sit down with someone, it's because you've broken a certain barrier and you're no longer putting that plastic like, hi, can I get you a glass of water? Can I do something?
Yeah.
Like you've broken that and they're like, oh, this is a real human being and they're having a real human moment with me and they're sharing real stuff that matters to them. And as such to me. So I find that often if I'm performing, people want to hang out and chat afterwards. And if I remember working a gig with a whole bunch of magicians and they just like burned through their tables. They were going like hardcore pro about it. And I was taking my time. People were like, sit. Do you want a drink? Do you want to join us for dinner? And I had to politely decline. But they're asking because it's not about like blasting them or throwing, hey, here you go. Now this, hold your hand out for me. Okay, did you feel that? No. Like people feel that thick layer of cheese on your work. And if we could just like peel that back and actually do something that means something to them or ask them a real question. But like one of the things I love with my audience is that I always say like, would you mind holding your hand out for me? Or would you mind helping me? You can say no. It's okay. Well, most of the time, magicians don't give them the out. They're like, oh, come on, guys. Give them a round of applause. What are you doing?
Right. It's a lot of pressure. No. Yeah.
They just said no. It's your job to actually make them regret it with how well you treat the person that says yes.
That's good. Yeah, that's a good way to be. I like that. Yeah.
Because they could come
Here's
back
something, though.
Did
you see this?
Else?
Someone mentioned to me not bringing up an African American to participate in illusion using a whip.
I don't even know how to respond to that sentence. I think that's all kinds of wrong to begin with. I mean,
I think
it's an unusual. It's an unusual thing for sure.
What illusion is using a whip? Can we just? I was
going to say
right away? Like
two things that come to mind.
Let Josh get a word in there, Shane.
Two things that come to mind. One, if you have an illusion that has a whip as well, good on you. And second, I think that someone could only tell you that if they are also African American. Like, if it's like, someone like
some
us
white person
saying you can't do that, then that's on them. That's not actually true. It's like people getting offended on behalf of other people. It's like that's what comes to mind.
I do a whip cracking stuff in one of my street shows where I do like a straight jacket escape and whip cracking, and never ever once have I had an issue with race at all. I do a thing called the Queensland's crossover, and I do that standing over the top of someone. And I've had people from all kinds of ethnic backgrounds be the person that's being Queensland crossovered over the top of. I never had an issue. I think that like it comes from in here, right? It depends on where it comes from when you're doing this stuff. Like if you're like up there making jokes about, being a cracker, you know what I mean? Because like a crack, obviously the term cracker is. It was like obviously people that own land and people, and they cracked whips to keep them in line, right? That would be an entirely different thing as opposed to like, hey, I just want to show you this cool shit that I can do. You know what I mean? Right? That's
the intent
big difference.
is in the right place.
It comes from in here. Yeah, it comes from in here. If you project negativity, of course, then absolutely probably shouldn't be out there with a whip, bringing on African Americans. That just doesn't seem right. But if it's coming from a place of just genuine kindness and stuff, it's not the same.
Brilliant.
I have a black friend that makes whips. Yeah, there you go.
There you go. Yeah. Making honey.
I don't know how to respond to that. I mean, the specific mention of an illusion using a whip, I just don't use anything in my show that could cause harm to another person. my show doesn't have an element of fear to it because I'm not interested in exploring that area personally. Yeah. So I just generally avoid that as a whole. I mean, the things that I would say that I saw a young magician at the Magic Circle, and he did a lecture, and he kind of fell into the trap I think a lot of magicians fall into when they're young, of course, is, you pick the prettiest girl you think is, the person you think the prettiest girl is in the room, and you bring them on stage to sit down with you and become your spectator. And I feel like, and then here's the classic mistake though. She was wearing a rather short dress, not terribly short, but it was like just slightly above the knee. Well, there wasn't like a tablecloth. So when she came to sit up on stage now, she's elevated about 3 or 4 feet. And he just didn't realize that it's not appropriate to bring someone on stage, for example, that may be in a position where their costume or clothing would reveal something that would not be something they'd want to reveal. So she spent the entire time, just like making very sure. Yeah. So she couldn't react to the magic properly. She couldn't do it. And afterwards, he's like, what did you think? And I said, I never want to see you choose a spectator for that reason again. And he was like, I don't understand. I said, why did you choose her? You're in an entire room of people. Why did you choose her? And I mean, he kind of dodged the bullet a little bit, like, oh, she was in the front row, or she was there. She looked like she was excited to do it. I said, no, but you could have chose anybody. There was clearly a bias.
Someone wearing like long pants or something. Yeah.
Yeah, or like why did it have to be a girl? That's one, like for me, I've tried to find ways to make sure that there's no bias in my selection procedures for people, which means whoever sits in that seat, that's who I'm using. If the script or something or the trick has some sort of gender specificity, which is very rare, I'd say, okay, I'm going to start there and then move one in if it's not that person and keep going until I find someone that matches it. But that takes away everything. Or if someone with disabilities is there or isn't fully abled in a way that I would potentially need them to help out with something, how do I handle that? What's
trying
that
to use
going to be?
an audience member to increase your moment just because they are attractive, right? That's
I don't
kind
get
of
it.
weird to me. Yeah, it's weird to me as
comes
well.
across poorly.
That's very Burt Wonderstone-y.
It's very 1990s is what it is. Where like everyone in the sitcom, the rom-com was like Cameron Diaz looking or Tia Leone.
I always partially call it the no stink theory as well. I think if you're going to get someone on stage, you can't have any stink of desperation. Like you want that girl to find you attractive because you're on the stage or something. You can't have that, man. Like, luckily for me, I'm married. She's the most amazing woman in the world. And I don't even look at other women like that. Do you know what I mean? So when it comes to when it comes to interacting with them, it's 100,000,000% platonic. There's no like salacious nature or any kind of like wanting them to be promiscuous for my crowd or something like that. No, it's just like they are as much a person as anyone else, right? So it's like, why would I treat them differently because they're wearing a skirt? It doesn't make sense to me.
But when they use them as a vehicle for cheap jokes,
that's it.
Like humor, and you're like, what are you doing? Like, that's really your best? That's really what you've got to say to your audience? Like you wrote that down?
That's when it starts falling into what Jerry was talking about. And Gutbuster Mike, good point. Low-hanging
fruit.
Exactly right. Yuck. I think that's probably the best reaction I've heard to stuff like this. Yuck.
Interesting. Are you looking forward to going back to the castle? Is that in the plans?
Yeah, you know what? I'm hoping to be. If it all works out, I'd love to go to the castle in like maybe 2 or 3 weeks. Fly out there for a few days and then hang out.
You should go too, Josh. Let's go fly up there and do a couple shows.
Let's do it. We'll fly from other sides of the world. We can meet in the middle.
We will meet again in person.
Are you kidding me? Absolutely. I mean, I've already had.
Aren't we going to MagicCon this year, Josh?
MagicCon, is that a thing?
Yeah, there was. MagicCon was the convention that the Buck Twins ran back in the day. It was incredible. There was, I think, 3 or 4 of them, but I don't know if it's still going.
Yeah,
we'll go to the Vegas Magic thing. I can't remember.
You mean Magic Live?
Magic Live.
That's the one. Magic Live. Whatever. Same shit, different stink.
That's sold out now. Congrats to them. Post, on the other side of the pandemic, they've sold out Magic Live.
Did you get tickets?
Of course not. I think it's like in May. It's coming up really soon. But
let's just go anyway. We'll just break in.
But next year, now that I know, because I don't even know how easy it is for us to travel to the US. But next year for sure.
It's pretty expensive to fly to the US at the moment.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm doing it. Let's go. Let's fucking go.
That's it. But
Josh, I got sad news, by the way. You know that sweet, sweet Lego globe that I built?
Yeah. Allegedly.
I fucking dropped it.
Oh, no.
It fucking exploded everywhere. It's incredible. Oh, shit.
Oh, my God.
And Lego fanatics across the globe just cried a single tear.
I got to rebuild it now. I got to sit there and rebuild it. But yeah, it was so funny. It was just funny because I heard it fall and because I bumped it with my chair. Like I was like wheeling back there to get something and I heard it fall, but I couldn't. There it is.
Oh, man, that looks amazing.
Oh, it's gone.
It took so many pieces, 2,600 pieces, and it just exploded.
Hey, at least now.
Or was it like a box set thing that you put together?
Yeah, it's like a box set thing that you put together. Yeah.
At least now you can do a time lapse of putting it back together.
6.5 hour time lapse. Jeez.
Yeah.
Stop motion. I want to see stop motion. I just want to see it slowly become.
I thought about making a YouTube video about it. I started filming it when I was making it, and then I was like, nah, screw this. I can't be bothered. It's just too much effort to try and film and enjoy the process of making. I just wanted to enjoy the process. So,
what's your biggest Lego build piece that you've got?
No, that was That was my first one.
That was a big one?
Yeah, I had never done it before. So
did you love the experience?
I just enjoy the therapeutic nature of puzzles and repetitive nature and all, it's good.
So with the last few minutes, Shane, what anything you want to say to the Magic friends watching?
Do better magic. That's it in a nutshell. Just do better magic. And that's not a knock on the stuff you're doing. It's more of a sort of a little poke to the psyche. Just, if you think you're doing the best magic you can do, you are. And if you think you can do better magic, you can. That's it. It always falls back to that. Do better magic. And the other one I'd say is just be a normal human being.
Also, if at any point anyone was offended by this podcast, I'd like to take this time to apologize for the inconvenience of me not giving a fuck.
Remember, offense is taken, not given. Offense is taken.
That's it. That's exactly it, right?
Wow, that's so true. Wow.
That's a good one to end on. Yeah, offense is taken. Thank you.
Just leave the review on Shane's Patreon.
Yeah, definitely. Of course. Anything you're offended about, shoot me a message. I'm happy to chat about it.
Absolutely. Shane, thank you again for coming on, my friend. You can
see. It's a great chat. I really enjoyed chatting with you, man.
Yeah, it's a shame Doug wasn't here as well with all his history. I think he would have got a
kick out of this too. I think we'll get you back on at some point, though, probably soon, in the next month.
All you got to do is ask.
Oh, yeah. I'd love to have Doug chat with you too, because he's got very good opinions of magic. Douglas Conn, if you've heard of him before.
I very much have. Yeah, I'm a fan. Doug's awesome.
Yeah, he would love to speak with you. Yeah.
Yeah, he's a part of the podcast.
Our third member. You can see him in the little drawing in the corner there. Douglas the J-Con.
He's in America. He's like your U.S. representative.
That is right. Yeah.
That's it. He's our PR guy, US PR guy.
So, guys, do better magic. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening. It's time for us to disappear now. But we'll see you again on the next episode of The Magic Guys.